Springfield, Missouri. Thursday, 4:17 p.m. The sun hangs low and golden over the Bible Belt, turning the bronze statue of the Virgin Mary into living fire. A dozen college students kneel on the church lawn of St. Mark's Parish, rosaries slipping through their fingers, soft Hail Marys rising like incense. Peace, prayer, the ordinary beauty of ordinary faith. Then a boot slams into the base of the statue with a sound like a rifle shot. Lucas Harper, 21, philosophy major, eyes burning with something between rage and despair, stands over the Virgin he just kicked in front of everyone. Phones are already up. Gasps slice the air. In that single, frozen second, an entire town is about to learn what happens when pride declares war on mercy and loses spectacularly 24 hours later. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Lucas Harper didn't wake up that morning planning to become the most hated student on campus. He grew up 3 hours south of Springfield, in a sagging trailer outside Branson where the neon of tourist theaters never reached. His father overdosed when Lucas was 10, found cold in a gas station bathroom with a needle still in his arm. His mother, a night shift nurse who smelled of bleach and exhaustion, kept a cracked statue of the Virgin on the dashboard of her rusted Corolla for luck. Lucas learned early that luck was a lie and statues were just molded plaster. By high school, he was the kid who could quote Nietzsche while changing your oil. Professors loved him. Classmates feared his tongue. At college, he walked the halls like a one-man crusade against weakness. Religion is the opium of the masses, he'd say, loud enough for the Catholic kids to hear. You kneel to stone. I kneel to no one. But inside, the fracture lines were spreading. He hadn't spoken to his mother in 6 weeks. The last time she called, she was crying about overdue rent. He told her to pray harder. Then he hung up and punched a dent in his dorm wall. That Thursday, the spring air smelled of lilacs and fresh-cut grass. The little group from the Catholic Student Center had gathered on the lawn of St. Mark's after their last class. Mostly Latino and Filipino kids who still believed their mother's rosaries could move mountains. Grace Sullivan clutched her blue glass beads and prayed for her dad's cancer scans. Diego Morales led the decades in a low, steady voice. Clara O'Brien closed her eyes and whispered for her brother stationed in the Middle East. They never saw Lucas coming. He appeared at the edge of the sidewalk like a storm front. Hoodie up, earbuds dangling, jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from the same stone he despised. For a moment, he just watched them bow their heads, and something inside him detonated. He crossed the grass in 4 furious strides. The students looked up just as his steel-toed boot swung to thud. The statue didn't topple. Mary never does, but the bronze rang like a struck bell. A black scuff marred her pedestal like an ugly bruise. Grace dropped her rosary. Diego stepped forward instinctively, fists balled. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Phones rose in every direction. Lucas scanned their stunned faces and spat. Stone doesn't save you. Wake up. It's all in your heads. Anger crackled across the lawn. Someone shouted. Another student started toward him. But before a single punch could fly, the heavy oak doors of the church creaked open. Father Gabriel stepped into the sunlight, black cassock catching the breeze, rosary swinging at his side. He walked slowly, no hurry, no fear, until he stood 3 feet from the young man, trembling with rage and something far more fragile. Then, in a voice so gentle it cut deeper than any scream, he said, "Son, when you strike her, you strike your own mother's heart." The lawn went dead silent. Lucas's smirk flickered and died. For one heartbeat, the mask slipped, and every witness saw the scared, furious little boy underneath. Then pride slammed the mask back into place. He muttered, "She's just plaster," turned, and walked away, but the phones had already caught everything. By the time the sun set behind the Ozark Hills, the clip was everywhere: group chats, Instagram stories, campus confession pages. Caption after caption screamed the same word: the kick. Half of Springfield was outraged. The other half was praying. And absolutely no one, not Grace Sullivan, not Father Gabriel, not even Lucas Harper himself, could have guessed that in less than 24 hours the same young man who mocked heaven would be found collapsed inside that very church, sobbing at the feet of the mother he had just desecrated, begging for the forgiveness he swore he would never need. What broke him wasn't punishment. It was something infinitely more powerful. By nightfall, the video had claimed its own cruel nickname, the kick. It spread faster than any rumor Springfield had ever known, slipping through phones and dorm lounges, family group chats, even the parish's own Facebook page where someone had posted it with the caption, "Pray for this young man." The clip played on silent repeat in crowded rooms, the dull metallic thud, the stunned faces, Father Gabriel's quiet voice carrying farther than any shout. Comments flooded in, waves of outrage, pockets of defense, and, beneath it all, a steady current of prayer that refused to be drowned out. Grace Sullivan watched it once, then again, then locked her phone and pressed her forehead against the cool window of her room. She kept hearing the priest's words the way one hears a song that will not leave. When you strike her, you strike your own mother's heart. Something in the sentence felt larger than the moment, as though Father Gabriel had seen straight into the wound Lucas carried and named it out loud. Across campus, in a narrow dorm lit only by the blue glow of screens, Lucas Harper sat on the edge of his bed and watched himself become a viral villain. Jake, his roommate, scrolled beside him, shaking his head in disbelief. "Bro, you're famous in the worst way possible. Half these people want you gone. The other half are lighting candles like you're already dead." Lucas forced a laugh that cracked halfway out, grabbed another energy drink, and told himself none of it mattered. Words on a screen. Pixels. Noise. But when the lights finally went out and Jake's breathing settled into the steady rhythm of sleep, the noise followed Lucas into the dark. He lay rigid, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying the afternoon in merciless detail. The warmth of the sun, the scent of lilacs, the exact moment his boot had connected with bronze. He told himself it had been a statement, a declaration of independence from fairy tales and weakness. Yet the statement now felt thin, almost childish, and the one line he could not delete from memory was the priest's calm, heartbreaking indictment, he thought, unwillingly, of his own mother asleep in that sagging trailer 3 hours south, her nightstand virgin watching over empty pill bottles and overdue bills. He had not answered her calls in weeks, had snapped at her the last time she asked whether he still went to Massachusetts. "Pray harder, Mom," he had said, voice dripping acid, before hanging up. Now the memory tasted like rust in his mouth. At 2:47 a.m., he gave up pretending he would sleep. He pulled on a hoodie, slipped out into the cool hush of campus, and walked without direction until he realized direction had found him. His steps carried him back to St. Mark's Lawn, where the statue stood beneath a single security lamp, arms still open, face still serene, the black scuff on her pedestal looking darker than sin in the artificial light. Lucas stopped at the edge of the grass, breathing hard, fists buried in his pockets. He wanted to cross the distance and kick again, just to prove the first time had changed nothing, just to prove the universe remained indifferent. His leg twitched with the impulse, but he stayed rooted, 10 feet away, as though an invisible line had been drawn he could not cross. Instead, a whisper escaped him, raw and involuntary. "Why does it even matter to you?" The wind moved through the trees overhead, rustling leaves like 1,000 quiet voices, and for the first time since childhood, Lucas Harper felt the full weight of being seen. He stumbled back to the dorm, collapsed fully clothed, and finally let exhaustion pull him under. That was when the dream came. He was falling through a starless sky that had no bottom, wind screaming past his ears, voices rising from the darkness below, classmates, professors, his mother, even his father's ghost, all laughing, all pointing. Atheist, coward, lost. The abyss opened its mouth to swallow him whole. He clawed at empty air, lungs burning, terror sharper than anything he had ever known. Then a light appeared, small at first, then growing until it filled the void with impossible warmth. A hand reached down through the blackness, pale, slender, marked faintly at the wrist with old scars. Without thinking, he seized it. The instant their fingers locked, the mocking voices vanished, the storm stilled, and he was drawn upward, gently, steadily, until he hovered face to face with the woman whose statue he had desecrated only hours before. Her eyes held every sorrow he had ever caused and every sorrow he had ever carried, yet they were not angry, only sorrowful, infinite, unbreakable in love. She said nothing aloud, but he heard her clearly inside the marrow of his bones. "You are not alone." That he jolted awake at 3:07 a.m., gasping, sheets twisted around his legs like restraints. The dorm room was silent except for Jake's soft snoring and the low hum of the mini fridge. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, head in his trembling hands, the warmth of that dream hand still pulsing in his palm as though it had burned a brand he could not rub away. Tears stung his eyes, hot, humiliating, impossible to stop, and for the first time since the night his father died, he did not fight them. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall on Springfield, soft as mercy, steady as a mother's heartbeat. Inside the narrow dorm room, the war had quietly begun. The old Lucas who had sworn he would kneel to no one, and the new, terrified whisper asking whether he had already begun the fall. Friday broke gray and damp over Springfield, the kind of morning that makes the world feel half asleep. Yet for Lucas Harper, every heartbeat sounded like a drum announcing judgment. He moved through campus wrapped in the same hoodie, earbuds in, but no music playing, because silence was now louder than any song. The dream from the night before clung to him, warm fingers still curled around his wrist, sorrowful eyes still searching his face. He kept telling himself it was only neurochemistry, only stress, only the mind's trick to punish guilt, but the explanation tasted like ash. Early afternoon found him crossing Elm and Jefferson, head down, replaying the metallic thud of his boot the way a tongue worries a broken tooth. He stepped off the curb without looking. A fully loaded delivery truck, late for its route, thundered through the green light, doing 45 in a 25 zone. The horn exploded first, a long, savage blast. Then the shriek of rubber tearing itself apart on wet asphalt. Lucas looked up and saw death coming in chrome and glass, close enough to read the mud flaps. Time did not slow, it simply stopped. He felt the impact before it arrived, the certainty of being erased, and in that frozen heartbeat something impossible happened. Invisible arms circled his chest from behind, strong yet infinitely tender, and yanked him backward through the air as though he weighed nothing at all. He landed hard on the sidewalk, breath punched out, ribs singing with pain, while the truck roared past, so close the side mirror clipped his sleeve and kept going. A stranger across the street shouted, "You okay?" Lucas could only nod, lungs on fire, staring at the empty space where his body had been a second earlier and no one had touched him. No human hand had grabbed his hoodie. He was alone on that crosswalk, yet the pressure around his ribs lingered like the memory of an embrace he had never known he needed. He pushed himself up on trembling legs and glanced down. In the shallow puddle beside him, catching the first break of sunlight through the clouds, shimmered the clear outline of a hand, palm open, fingers gently curved, luminous against the dark water. It glowed for 3, perhaps 4 heartbeats, then dissolved into ordinary ripples. Lucas stood frozen until horns blared again and the world lurched back into motion. He walked away whispering, "That did not happen," but his voice cracked on every word. Later, when the sky had cleared to a washed-out blue, he found himself drifting past the library. A small flower stand had appeared on the sidewalk, buckets of roses and sunflowers glowing like small suns against the gray day. Behind it sat Mrs. Evelyn Harper, silver hair pulled into a loose knot, hands moving among the stems with the calm of someone who has already survived the worst. She looked up and smiled the way only a grandmother can smile at a stranger who looks ready to shatter. "You look like you've been dragged through hell and back, sweetheart," she said softly. The words slipped past every defense. Lucas stopped. "I almost got hit by a truck an hour ago," he heard himself answer, surprised by the rawness in his own voice. Mrs. Evelyn nodded as though young men confessed near death to her every day. She held out a single sunflower, bright and ridiculous and perfect. "Sometimes the Lord has to shout before we listen," she said. "Sometimes he just wraps his arms around us and pulls." Lucas tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat. He took the flower because refusing felt suddenly impossible. Mrs. Evelyn studied him a moment longer, eyes gentle, unafraid. "My only son was killed in a school shooting 12 years ago this spring," she said, voice steady as river stone. "I cursed God for a long time. Told him I was finished with him. Then one night, I dreamed I was in a dark room and my boy was crying behind a wall I couldn't break. A woman in white came, took him in her arms, and looked straight at me with eyes so sorrowful and so kind they broke what was left of my heart. She didn't speak, but I knew my child was safe. I woke up sobbing, and for the first time since the funeral I could breathe." Lucas shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of her peace. "How do you know it wasn't just your mind trying to comfort you?" he asked, the old skepticism rising like a shield. Mrs. Evelyn smiled, small and knowing. "Because the comfort stayed. If my mind invented her, then my mind gave me a gift greater than I deserved. Either way, I was held. And I believe, with every beat of this tired heart, that it was our Blessed Mother who came for me that night." She pressed the sunflower into his hand and closed his fingers around the stem. He walked away clutching it like evidence. Dusk painted the sky violet and gold when his feet carried him, once again, to St. Mark's lawn. The statue stood bathed in the last light. The scuff mark his boot had left now catching the sun in a strange, living way, almost like a vein of molten silver threading through bronze. He stood staring, chest tight, afraid to step closer and afraid to leave that a small voice rose beside him. "Do you see the light too?" He turned and found little Sophie, 8 years old, pigtails escaping her pink hood, eyes wide with the unshakable certainty of childhood. She pointed at the mark. "It means she's still here. My grandma says Mary never leaves, even when people are mean to her." Before he could form an answer, she skipped away, humming the Ave Maria under her breath, leaving only the scent of baby shampoo and the whisper that drifted after her on the evening breeze. "I never leave." That night, Lucas did not sleep. He sat at his desk with the sunflower standing guard in an empty energy drink can, staring at the wall until letters and numbers blurred. The invisible embrace around his ribs, the glowing handprint, Mrs. Evelyn's impossible peace, Sophie's childlike faith. Piece by piece, the fortress he had built against heaven began to crack along every seam he had pretended didn't exist. Outside, the moon rose full and quiet over the Ozarks. Inside a narrow dorm room, a young man who had sworn war on tenderness discovered, with growing terror and trembling wonder, that tenderness had already surrounded him, claimed him, and would not let him go. Saturday crept in on soft feet, the kind of spring day Springfield usually celebrates with open windows and backyard barbecues. Yet for Lucas Harper, the sunlight felt intrusive, almost accusatory. He had not slept more than 20 minutes at a stretch. Every time his eyes closed, he felt again the invisible arms around his chest, the luminous handprint dissolving into water, the whisper that refused to stay outside his skull. I never leave. He kept the sunflower on his desk like contraband evidence. Its bright face turned toward him as though waiting for confession. By late afternoon, the campus had emptied into weekend rhythm, laughter echoing from frisbees across the quad, car stereos thumping toward the lake. But Lucas drifted like a ghost among the living. He told himself he was only walking to clear his head, yet every path curved back toward St. Mark's. He fought it for hours, circling blocks, buying coffee he didn't drink, sitting on benches he didn't see, until the sun bled orange behind the church steeple and surrender felt less painful than resistance. He stood at the edge of the lawn again. The statue waited exactly where she had always waited, arms open, the silver-threaded scuff now hidden in shadow. No little girl this time, no flower lady, only the hush of evening settling over the town like a held breath. Lucas took one step onto the grass, then another, heart hammering so violently he feared someone across the street would hear it. He stopped 2 feet from the pedestal and stared up into the bronze face that had haunted him for 48 hours. Up close, the expression was unbearable, sorrowful, yes, but not wounded, patient, but not passive, loving in a way that made his own hatred feel suddenly childish and small. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to curse again, maybe to apologize, he never knew which, because the sky darkened without warning and the second dream took him while he was still standing. He found himself in an abandoned stadium under a sky the color of old bruises. Bleachers rusted and empty, wind howling through broken loudspeakers, the air thick with smoke that smelled of every breath. The ground split beneath his feet with a sound like the world tearing in half. He fell, arms windmilling, into a pit that had no bottom, only layers of darkness and voices rising to meet him. Classmates jeering, professors sneering, his mother weeping, his father's ghost laughing from the grave. Atheist. Coward. You think you're strong? The cold was absolute. It froze the scream in his throat. He fell faster, certain this time there would be no hand, no light, only the impact he deserved. Then the light came anyway, softer than moonlight yet brighter than noon, cutting through the smoke like a blade of mercy. The same hand reached down, pale, scarred at the wrist, steady as bedrock. He seized it with both of his, desperate, sobbing even in the dream, and felt himself lifted, drawn upward through the shrieking darkness until the mocking voices thinned into silence and the storm cracked open like an eggshell. He hovered, trembling, face to face with her again. This time her eyes held galaxies of sorrow and an ocean of forgiveness he had no right to drink from. Her lips did not move, yet the words filled every corner of his soul, gentle, heartbroken, irresistible. You are not alone. Come back. That he woke on his knees in the grass of St. Mark's lawn, forehead pressed to the cool bronze pedestal, tears already soaking the scuff mark his boot had left. Dusk had deepened into night. Crickets sang in the hedges. A street lamp buzzed overhead. He had no memory of falling, only the crushing certainty that something inside him had already shattered beyond repair. He stayed there a long time, shaking, whispering fragments he didn't understand yet. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please. Eventually he stood, legs numb, and stumbled back to the dorm. Jake was out. The room smelled of pizza boxes and stale cologne. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed, sunflower now wilted, and waited for the second night to pass. But sleep, when it finally came, brought no mercy, only the third and final dream. This time the stadium was gone. He stood in a vast, endless corridor of mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of himself. The angry child screaming at his mother's virgin statue, the teenager sneering at funerals, the philosophy major dismantling faith in crowded cafeterias, the young man kicking bronze because tenderness felt like defeat. Every mirror laughed at him. Then the mirrors began to crack, one by one, shards falling away into darkness until only one remained, unbroken. In it he saw himself on his knees, small and trembling, forehead against the pedestal, tears washing the scuff mark clean. Behind his reflection stood the woman in white, hand resting lightly on his shoulder, eyes shining with tears that were not accusation, but welcome. He woke at 3:11 a.m. gasping her name without meaning to. Mary, the word torn from him like a sob he could no longer swallow. The dorm room spun. He pressed both hands over his face and felt the tears come hot and unstoppable, the kind of crying that starts in the gut and will not be reasoned with. For the first time since his father's overdose, he wept without shame, without audience, without the armor of intellect. Raw, ragged, childlike. When the storm inside him finally quieted, the room was colder, the silence deeper, and Lucas knew with absolute, terrifying clarity that he could not outrun this any longer. Sunday morning was coming. The bells of St. Mark's would ring at 8, 9, 10, 11, and every toll would be a summons he no longer had the strength to refuse. He did not sleep again. He sat in the dark, clutching the wilted sunflower until the first pale light crept through the blinds. And when the bells began their slow, inevitable song across Springfield, Lucas Harper pulled on his hoodie, stepped into the gray dawn, and walked the familiar path that now felt like walking to his own execution and his own resurrection at once. Sunday morning in Springfield arrived wrapped in low clouds and the smell of rain that had not yet decided to fall. Church bells began their slow pilgrimage across the town, first distant, then closer, then inside the bones. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, each toll striking Lucas Harper like a hammer on the anvil of his heart. He had not changed clothes, had not showered, had not looked in a mirror since the dream left him sobbing at 3:11 a.m. His eyes were red-rimmed, his cheeks streaked with dried salt, the wilted sunflower clutched in one fist like a passport to a country he no longer deserved to enter. Yet his feet moved anyway, carrying him down familiar sidewalks now transformed into something that felt like the road to Calvary and home at the same time. St. Mark's stood quiet, doors flung wide, candlelight flickering gold against the gray morning. A few early parishioners trickled in, Mrs. Margaret arranging hymnals, Mr. Tom in his plaid shirt sliding into the back pew with a thermos of coffee, the soft murmur of rosaries already begun. No one noticed the hooded figure who paused on the top step, breathing as though he had sprinted the whole way. Lucas looked up at the bronze Virgin above the entrance, arms open as always, and felt the last wall inside him buckle. He stepped across the threshold. The scent hit him first. Beeswax, old wood, faint incense, the same perfume that had once made him sneer now wrapped around him like memory and mercy combined. Sunlight filtered through stained glass and painted the floor in slow-moving rivers of blue and crimson. He walked the aisle as though wading through deep water, every step heavier, every breath shorter, until his knees simply gave out 3 pews from the front. He fell hard, palms slapping the wooden kneeler, forehead dropping to the edge of the seat in front of him. Then the dam broke. The sound that came out of him was not human at first, more animal than man. A raw, guttural cry torn from the deepest place a soul can hide. "I'm sorry," he choked, voice cracking open like thin ice. "I'm so sorry, please forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't know." The words poured out in no order, English and fragments of childhood Spanish his mother had taught him when she still believed prayers could fix anything. Her name, Madre. "I struck you. I struck my own mother, please." His body shook with sobs that came from the soles of his feet, tears soaking the kneeler, the wilted sunflower crushed against his chest. Parishioners turned, startled, then stilled. No one moved to hush him. Mrs. Margaret's eyes filled. Mr. Tom set down his coffee and bowed his head. The church itself seemed to lean in, holding its breath. Father Gabriel appeared as if he had been waiting in the shadows all along. He walked the aisle without hurry, cassock brushing the pews, and knelt beside the trembling young man who only 72 hours earlier had spat defiance at heaven. He said nothing at first, simply laid a weathered hand on Lucas's shoulder and let the boy cry himself empty. When the storm finally slowed to ragged breathing, the priest drew a small wooden rosary from his pocket, beads worn smooth by decades of other broken hearts, and pressed it into Lucas's palm. "Mary never turns away her children," he whispered, voice low enough that only Lucas and God could hear. "She has been waiting for you since the moment you were conceived." Lucas clutched the beads as though they were the only solid thing left in the universe. Fresh tears came, quieter now, the kind that cleanse instead of wound. Father Gabriel began the Hail Mary, soft and steady. One by one, voices around the church joined. Mrs. Margaret, Mr. Tom, a young mother with her toddler, an old veteran in the back corner, until the sanctuary filled with the ancient rhythm that has carried sinners home for 2,000 years. Lucas did not know the words yet, but he felt them settle into his bones like rain into parched earth. When the prayer ended, sunlight broke through the clouds and poured through the rose window above the altar, washing the entire church in sudden, fierce color. To some it was coincidence. To everyone who witnessed the boy on his knees, it was the sky itself saying yes. Later, no one could quite remember how long he stayed there. Minutes blurred into an hour. When Lucas finally rose, legs numb, face streaked and shining, he looked at the statue of the Virgin at the side altar, the same statue whose twin he had kicked, and for the first time in his life he did not see stone. He saw welcome. Word traveled faster than the Sunday bells. By Monday, the viral video of the kick had a sequel no algorithm could have predicted. Quiet phone footage, taken from the back pew, of the same young man on his knees, rosary clutched like a lifeline, Father Gabriel's hand on his shoulder, tears washing the floor. The comments changed overnight. From outrage to awe, from condemnation to tears. Grace Sullivan watched it in her dorm and whispered, "I will never again call him the boy who kicked Mary. He is the boy she refused to let go." Lucas did not become perfect. Doubt still whispered on hard days. Pride still flared when old friends mocked him. But he carried that rosary everywhere, fingers tracing the beads in lecture halls, in the library, in the dead of night when fear crept back. He began slipping into the back pew at St. Mark's, hood down now, head sometimes bowed, sometimes lifted to the tabernacle with the wondering eyes of a child discovering color for the first time. Springfield, Missouri, a small Bible Belt town that thought it had seen everything, learned again what the Gospels have been trying to say for 2,000 years. No heart is too hard for mercy to crack. No wound is too deep for a mother's tears to heal. No prodigal is ever turned away when he finally comes home. They still show the two videos side by side sometimes. The kick and the collapse, defiance and surrender, the before and the after of a soul touched by grace. And every time, without fail, someone new drops to their knees somewhere in the world and whispers the same words Lucas Harper sobbed that Sunday morning. "Forgive me. I didn't know." I'm home. If this story stirred your heart, leave a comment below and tell me where Mary has found you when you thought you were too far gone. Subscribe, because every week we bring you fresh proof that the woman who stood beneath the cross still stands beneath every cross we carry, waiting, arms open, whispering the same unbreakable promise: I never leave.